You know, I get really tired of these talk show hosts on Sunday. I'm talking about Fox News. I'm talking about Meet the Press. I'm talking about Face the Nation. I'm talking about This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Reince Priebus and Mike Pence were all over these Sunday morning talk shows. I'm going to play clips from Reince Priebus's interviews and also Mike Pence's interviews. And I am more than ticked off at people like John Wilkerson, people like Chuck Todd, people like George Stephanopoulos, and even Mike Wallace, who is on Fox, and I'm not a big fan of Fox, but I really have a lot of respect for Mike Wallace as far as not allowing his guests to dictate the interviews for the most part. But today it was different. Now, I'm going to play this interview with Reince Priebus crying about John Lewis and his comments regarding Donald Trump and how John Lewis should not have said what he said, etc. And I'll comment on that as we move along.
Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. Mr. Priebus, welcome back to the program, sir.
Thank you, Chuck.
Let me start with something Republican Congressman Justin Amash tweeted. He had a pretty succinct response to the third tweet that the president-elect made on John Lewis. Simply, dude, just stop. Let me ask you this. Did the president-elect contemplate reaching out to Congressman Lewis privately before tweeting?
Look, here's the thing. I think that, Chuck...
Okay, notice he's not going to answer the question. He's going to jump to what he wants to talk about.
It's shocking that Congressman Lewis, who is a civil rights icon and is a person who's championing voting rights, would actually question the legitimacy of an election in this country and starting this firestorm. I mean, the truth is, Donald Trump won 30 of 50 counties. He won about 128 out of the 159 counties in Georgia. He flipped 200 counties that Obama won and had the biggest electoral landslide on our side of the aisle since Ronald Reagan. I mean, I get you want to go back and forth on tweets, but the truth is it's irresponsible for John Lewis, historic as he is, to have done this. And the other piece of this, Chuck, is that Barack Obama should step up as well.
Let me stop him right there. First of all, the numbers that he cited are absolutely true, no ifs, ands, or buts. That wasn't what John Lewis was talking about. He wasn't talking about the actual tabulated results. He was talking about the cause for the results. And you specifically, number one, didn't answer the question about Donald Trump reaching out to John Lewis before making those tweets. And two, the fact that John Lewis believes that the Russians had a material effect on the thinking of the people who cast the votes. That's where this is, okay? It's not about the actual tabulated results, which you are resting your laurels on, but you conveniently want to ignore the fact that Donald Trump lost the election via the popular vote by more than 3 million. So, again, Chuck Todd is not going to do a follow-up on his own question.
And call it what it is. It's wrong what is happening. It's wrong how some of these Democrats are treating President-elect Trump. We have a great relationship with the White House. I talk to Dennis McDonough every day. We had a great meeting with all of our cabinet members and all of the sitting cabinet members in the White House on Friday. The transfer of power within the White House is going great. But
yeah, and it was just as wrong for how the Republicans treated President Obama. They did the same thing to him that the Democrats are doing to Trump, except the Democrats have at least a little something to hang their hats on. The Republicans, before Obama was had even taken the oath of office, were plotting against them. So you taking this holier than thou attitude about oh, poor Donald Trump, they're being unfair to him. Yeah, but you were just as unfair, you and your buddies, to President Obama.
To do this to President-elect Trump 5 days before he puts his hand on the Bible, it's just wrong. And by the way, the Democrats are fundraising on this comment from Congressman Lewis right now. So they're making money on it.
Let me ask you this, because one of the things that Congressman Lewis says that he will never forget and possibly never forgive is when Donald Trump said that Vladimir Putin was a stronger leader than President Obama. And there's going to be some other people that respond to your comments right now, Mr. Priebus, and say, Donald Trump spent 5 years questioning the legitimacy of Barack Obama's constitutional viability to be president of the United States with the birther controversy. Do you understand why there are going to be some who look at your criticism of John Lewis and say, that's hypocritical coming from somebody that works for Donald Trump?
Now watch, he's going to flip it around again, okay? He's going to try to misrepresent the words regarding Vladimir Putin and Trump stating that he was a stronger leader, and he's going to change that around, and he's not going to answer the question of as far as the hypocrisy of the legitimacy of the presidency when Donald Trump for 5 years was questioning the legitimacy of Barack Obama as president because of the birther bullshit. But as usual, Mr. Priebus is going to try to change and conflate the subject and claim that they're not the same. They absolutely are the same. If you question the legitimacy of a president, you are questioning the legitimacy of a president, regardless of whatever the reason is. Now, in this particular case, there may or may not, depending on your point of view, be a reason to question Donald Trump's legitimacy. There was absolutely no reason, no information, just bullshit made up by Donald Trump and his birther buddies regarding the legitimacy of President Obama. Okay, now you can listen to his answer.
So, first of all, the president-elect never said that Vladimir Putin was a better person. He didn't say that he was.
I said stronger leader.
He looked up to Vladimir.
See? Exactly. Trump didn't say better person. He said stronger leader. That's what Chuck Todd said, but now he's trying to shift the point of attention. Okay, and Chuck Todd did just call him out and say and correct him as to exactly what was said. And they do this shit all the time.
Wait, hang on.
But my question to you was stronger leader, for what it's worth. That's what I quoted.
Okay, I get it. I'm trying to make the distinction. It wasn't he's a better person. I would rather have him as president of the United States. It was that the characteristics of leadership can be parsed and compared. And characteristic qualities can be a lot of things, and that's what he was talking about. But certain
that's bullshit, because you cannot judge the characteristics of a leader when you're talking about two different political systems. Okay, what works in one political system does not work in, or should not, or may not work in a different political system. You could, however, flip President Obama into the Russian political system and the people would benefit because he would not be a dictator. You then could flip Putin into our system and he would be nowhere near as effective, unless you want to count the fact that he would have damn near everybody that was against him killed. So that's a false narrative, that's a false comparison.
They wouldn't prefer Vladimir Putin over Barack Obama as president of the United States. That's ridiculous. And to take an old argument about where the president was born has nothing to do with whether or not.
How is that an old argument when Donald Trump was making that argument as recently as March and April of this past year. So that is not an old argument. Now he's going to try to bullshit us and state that Donald Trump really hasn't made that argument for the past, he's going to, I think, say 4 or 5 years. That is a lie, and these guys constantly get on here and lie, and these hosts don't call them on it, and they don't press them on it.
In democracy in the United States, whether Donald Trump won the election and whether it was legitimate. James Clapper, the intelligence community, I don't know if John Lewis knows more than they do, but they have concluded that there's no evidence that anything that was done in the course of this election by Russians or whoever changed the course of this election. In fact, the only evidence there is of tampering and having a real connection to foreign leadership was the DNC paying an operative over $400,000 to meddle in the Ukraine to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. No one's talking about the $400,000 that the DNC spent digging up dirt with an operative in the Ukraine. There's nothing here in regard to this issue in Russia, and all of the defense intelligence agencies have concluded that.
I'm just curious, when you say there's nothing here, there's
evidence that changed the outcome of the election.
See, Chuck caught him on that. There's nothing here. That's bullshit. Okay? There may not be any solid evidence that they have turned up at this point, but there absolutely, in my opinion, something here. And that's why their congressional investigations are starting about this entire matter. But this guy is full of shit.
You're not disputing that there is a lot of evidence of Russia's attempt to interfere in the election.
I'm not disputing that the Russian entities hacked the DNC, but I'm not going to go back to our interview of a few.
See, he just changed it again. He changed it from Russian interference in the election, and he tried to step it down to Russian hacking the DNC. The intelligence agencies have stated emphatically that the Russians attempted to interfere in our election, and he cannot make the words come out of his mouth. He cannot acknowledge that, because that in turn leads people to have less confidence in the legitimacy of Donald Trump. So he absolutely cannot say that. He's full of shit. I'm sorry, I keep saying it, but he is.
Weeks ago, I am also going to say that when you don't have any defenses on your computer system and you basically hand over 50,000 emails, obviously that makes it a whole lot easier.
Oh, okay. So now he's going to say it's the DNC's fault that the Russians decided that they wanted to attack them. That's just like saying I have a $20 bill in my hand, and I'm a little weak, frail man. So some big, strong person decides to take that $20 bill away from me, and I'm not strong enough to hold on to my $20 bill. So that makes it my fault that this guy decided that he was going to steal my money. Right.
And I also think that the Clinton folks wasted $1 billion of their donors' money, and they've got a lot to answer for. And none of this would be happening if Hillary Clinton would have simply not used a personal server in violation of federal law.
Okay.
Now that one, I will agree with him 100%. If she hadn't done that, she probably would have won the election. But let me circle back to one thing. The intelligence agencies have also stated that they cannot determine if the Russians actually had an effect on the election. They've indicated that there is no way to judge it. So again, he's using misinformation. He's generating an opinion that he's trying to put out there as fact. And he didn't put the complete opinion of the intelligence agencies out there for the general public to judge for themselves.
But Mr. Priebus, does that excuse a foreign government from attempting to interfere in the United States election?
Of course not. All of it's wrong. China's wrong, Russia's wrong, Iran's wrong.
Okay, notice what he did. So we're talking about Russia, and now he just opened up and expanded the field to everybody else saying, well, it's not just them doing it, it's everybody doing it. Nah, my friend. We're talking about the Russians who have attempted to interfere in our elections. The Chinese didn't try to interfere in our elections from what we know. Neither did the Iranians, neither did anybody else. We're talking about a country that did try to interfere. It's the Russians. So don't try to diminish the fact that it was the Russians by trying to clump in everybody else.
All of these entities are wrong for doing what they've done, but back to John Lewis, for him then to say, which no intelligence official is saying, that Donald Trump was elected illegitimately is irresponsible.
That's not irresponsible, that's his opinion.
And just because he's a civil rights leader and someone that I respect as a civil rights leader and someone that, I went to Selma with him and many others a few years ago, it doesn't excuse the fact that his statement was not responsible, and it's not right, and it's too bad because President-elect Trump's going to be a great president, and this country elected him in an electoral landslide, and it's a shame.
Okay, so his statements are irresponsible, but the lies that Donald Trump told throughout his primaries and throughout the presidential election, those weren't irresponsible. Again, pot calling kettle black.
Really a shame that 5 days from now, he's being sworn in and we're talking about this.
I want to talk about, because the issue has to do with Russia, and there was another dispute and some concern that on the same day that the Obama administration announced new sanctions against Russia for their meddling in the 2016 election, that the incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was on the phone multiple times with the Russian ambassador to the United States. Can you say definitively that there was no promises, no winks, no anything that somehow there was an acknowledgement that these sanctions will go away as quickly as possible once the inauguration takes place?
So, Chuck, almost every single day, General Flynn talks to counterparts and ambassadors from all over the world, almost every single day. That's his job. So, as a national security advisor, for those that don't know, one of his jobs is to be in constant communication with his counterparts and security issues all over the world. The TikTok on this is that on Christmas, the two of them texted each other, "Merry Christmas." A couple days later, this ambassador texted General Flynn that he wanted to talk, and then the next day they had a conversation, which did happen to be that same day, but I have talked to General Flynn. None of that came up. The subject matter of sanctions or the actions taken by the Obama administration did not come up in the conversation. In fact, it was the sports team that was in an unfortunate plane accident. They talked about setting up a phone call after inauguration, and they also talked about a conference in Syria, and that a conference in regard to ISIS in Syria. So those were the only subjects that came up, but there's no controversy in General Flynn talking to his counterparts around the world.
So
I suggest that there is a controversy. Number one, they text each other Merry Christmas. Okay, fine, I'll let that one go. Okay, number two, 2 days before Obama it actually issued the sanction, everybody and their brother here knew that that was going on. So Flynn decides he's going to talk to him again. Number three, and the damning is part of this, is on the day that President Obama issued the sanction, Flynn didn't talk to this guy not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now you tell me, okay, what went on? And I'm not buying what this guy is saying as far as they talked about 3 separate subjects over 3 phone calls. They could have gotten all of that ground covered 1 phone call. No, there was back and forth conversation going on as to the sanctions that Obama had just placed on Russia. So, and you will never convince me otherwise. And unless there's actual recordings, which the Russians probably have on their side, but we don't have on this side, there will never be any proof to the contrary.
was no challenge of American policy currently. by Mr. Flynn with the Russian
None.
ambassador. Okay, one final question.
No,
There's a
no, sir.
there's a new report out this morning from Esquire magazine that includes that it is your intent to remove the White House press corps from the White House. Is that true?
Well, look, first of all, well, let me go, no, because the White House obviously is 18 acres, right, Chuck? So no, the technical answer is no. But what we have is that you saw the news conference the other day, and by the way, I'd have to quarrel with you. I don't think it was a bizarre news conference. I don't think it's a fair characterization, but there was 500 to 600 reporters at that news conference. What I'm talking about, what we're talking about, and the only thing that was even discussed about this was whether or not you want to take that room that only holds 50 people in that very small press room, which it looks big on TV, but it's very tiny,
Right.
and whether you want to go 50 feet to the EOB and have, for the first few weeks or the first month or so, the press conferences where you can fit 3 to 4 times the amount of
So
people.
this is not
It's
about-
about more access.
So this is not
This
about
is just about
the office space or any of that business.
This is about quadrupling the amount of reporters that can cover our press conference.
But there will still be reporters.
in the White House.
There will still be reporters every day going to work in the White House.
That hasn't been determined, Chuck, but as of now, the only thing that
That hasn't been determined. So you're basically saying you are trying to make a decision whether there are going to be reporters, White House press corps or not. And that's basically what the article was saying, that you guys are thinking about or getting ready to kick out the White House corps. And you just confirmed it.
created this story, I just want to make it very clear, was the question of whether or not
Right.
the press briefings, at least initially, are going
So
to
this
be
is this about,
the
but you're not
EOB.
answering the question. Is this about press briefings or is this about kicking the press out of the building altogether?
This is about press briefings. That's
Okay.
what created this story.
All right, Reince Priebus, I will leave it there. So the press will still be going to work every day in the White
How
House
about
and
a
the
little
Trump
go
administration.
pack?
All right, so, and he went on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and you know something, I'm gonna put that clip together too. Give me a second. All right, now here's the clip from the This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and watch this mealy-mouthed motherfucker, Reince Priebus, try to moderate his tone somewhat at the beginning of the interview.
And now we are joined by the incoming White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. Mr. Priebus, thanks for joining us again this morning.
Good morning, George.
Well, the president-elect has stirred up quite a firestorm with his latest tweet. Was this a right fight for him to pick?
Well, look, I mean, here's the issue. We look up to John Lewis and his historic contribution to civil rights and voting rights.
But the president-elect said he was all talk, no action.
But
Yeah, exactly. All talk, no action. And you want to try to have us believe that he looks up to a person that's all talk and no action, which is a major mischaracterization of John Lewis's record, I'll say.
But well, let me answer. But here's the problem. We need folks like John Lewis and others who I think have been champions of voter rights actually recognize the fact that Donald Trump was duly elected. He's going to put his hand on the Bible in 5 days. And I think it's incredibly disappointing, and I think it's irresponsible for people like himself to question the legitimacy of the next United States president. I think putting the United States down across the world is not something that a responsible person does. And so, look, I think, in fact,
Putting the United States down, if there's anybody that has caused the United States to be put down, it's your guy, Donald Trump, by railing against NATO, siding with Putin at every opportunity, creating fear and damn near panic in the Baltic states. You talk about putting somebody down. Give me a fucking break.
I think President Obama could step up.
Okay, and here he goes with, yeah, and President Obama should be on our side too. That's a bunch of bullshit too. Donald Trump has caused this problem. Donald Trump's the one that's up tweeting 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning And it's not President Obama. So, hey, you get what you reap, and I don't want to say anything else because I'm getting more perturbed every time I think about this guy.
We've had a great relationship with the White House, George. We just had every cabinet person, designee of ours, meet with the cabinet members of the Obama administration on Friday. I've met numerous times with Dennis McDonough. They've been nothing but helpful. So I think the administration can do a lot of good by telling folks that are on their side of the aisle, look, we may have lost the election on the Democrat side, but it's time to come together.
But isn't it harder to do that after a tweet like that from the president-elect?
Well, wait a second. But George, hang on. John Lewis stood up in an interview and said that Donald Trump was not a legitimate president. That's insanity. And it's wrong. And DNI Director Clapper said as much many times that there is no evidence that any outcome of the election was changed.
No. He said that they could not determine, okay, if the Russian interference had in any way influenced the election. That's what they said.
Elect Trump won 30 of 50 states, more counties since Ronald Reagan. This man won in an electoral landslide. And to question the legitimacy of the next United States president, and you're worried about a tweet that says, hey, why don't you get back to work instead of questioning my legitimacy? Too bad.
We just had Senator Sanders.
Oh, so now it's too bad, but obviously you respected this man. Oh, and you forgot to mention that he denigrated John Lewis personally, but I guess that doesn't count either.
On the program, he did not question legitimacy of the president. Like he said, he's going to attend the inauguration, but he did say that it was right to bring up questions like this because of Donald Trump's past and questioning the legitimacy of Barack Obama with those years and years of questions about where he was born.
Watch him deflect from this one.
The Donald Trump's made it clear that, and certainly over the last few years,
notice he just said the last few years. 6 months?
That President Obama was born in Hawaii, but the point is
not until the end of the campaign.
But hang on a second, George. We're not questioning.
See, and George Stephanopoulos just corrected him, and now he's going to shift away from the truth. It wasn't the last few years that Donald Trump has acknowledged the legitimacy of Barack Obama. It was at the end, and actually it wasn't even at the end. It was during the last few months before the election that he finally gave a one sentence acknowledgement that Barack Obama was legitimate. One sentence, and then he walked off the stage.
The legitimacy of the outcome of the election. You didn't have Republicans questioning whether or not Obama legitimately beat John McCain in 2008. For a person that is a champion of voter rights to question whether or not Donald Trump legitimately won an election or not is an incredible position to take 5 days before an inauguration.
Okay, notice the subtle reasoning. Mr. Priebus is trying to intimate that John Lewis was questioning the actual vote itself. That's not what John Lewis was questioning. So again, he's trying to shift the focus of the argument. You have to pay attention to these guys, because before you know it, they'll be selling you apples as oranges and tangerines as pears.
And so I
Some
think that
Democrats
it's an outrage.
Some Democrats have, including David Axelrod, have made that point at all. But it is a fact that Donald Trump was questioning whether President Obama was eligible to serve as president under the Constitution.
And many people were, George, but that's...
So he doesn't want to answer the question about Trump. So now he does the same thing he did previously when we were talking about Russia. And then he says, well, Russia and China and Iran and others. doing the same exact thing here where, he wants to give a quick acknowledgement, okay, but then throw it off and say, yeah, and everybody else was too. That is such a childish answer. I mean, 5-year-olds can't get away with that answer anymore.
Issue's been resolved for years now, and it's been...
There he goes with the issues being resolved for years. No, you just resolved the issue, or Trump did, within the past 6 months. So stop lying.
Resolved for at least 2 years in Donald Trump's mind, and to bring that up as justification for John Lewis questioning the legitimacy of a democratic activity that has been around since the beginning of our country is wrong.
Just a factual point. He didn't stop raising those questions. He didn't stop raising those questions until late in this campaign, not 2 years.
But look, George, that's not the point. The point is not...
That is the point. You just lied and he caught you. That's the point. Oh, Jesus.
Where Barack Obama was born. The point is that we've got congressmen on the Democratic side of the aisle that are questioning the legitimacy of President-elect Trump, who won in an electoral landslide. That's the issue. That's where the outrage should be. Not old news, but the fact that we are preparing for the transfer of power, and we have been working with President Obama hand in glove, and I think that they, including the president, should step up and get his people in line and tell them to grow up and accept the fact that they lost the election.
Let's move on to the issue of Russia. The president-elect in the Wall Street Journal yesterday saying he would consider lifting sanctions on Russia in the future depending on how they deal with the threat against ISIS. That seems to be at odds with what his nominees were saying up on Capitol Hill this week. You had James Mattis, Pentagon nominee, saying Russia is the #1 threat and saying he wants to come up with a strategy to confront Russia for what it did. Mike Pompeo, CIA nominee, saying Russia's doing nothing to defeat ISIS. And Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State nominee, saying that now is not the time to talk about lifting sanctions. So that seems to be quite a gulf between the president-elect and his team.
Right, but I think all three of those men that you just mentioned, depending on what deal was struck with Russia, depending on what terms the deal would have and what incremental steps we'd have to take and measurements that we'd have to take with potentially Russia in a deal, some of those positions could change. And some of President-elect Donald Trump's positions could change depending on what deal could be struck. But overall, to your point, I can tell you just from working closely for the last year and a half with President-elect, and even over the course of the last 6 weeks, he has no problem.
See, George should have stopped him right there and said, well, can you give me an example of a deal that could be struck that would allow the sanctions to be lifted? Both the old sanctions when the Russians invaded and annexed Crimea, and the new sanctions for the Russians attacking our political system. That's the follow-up question. He should have stopped him in his tracks and asked him that question right then and there.
With differing opinions in a room. In fact, I think he welcomes the fact that he's got people in the room that may not agree with each other on everything, but he prefers to be presented opinions that are varying at the same time and then making an informed decision based on everyone's input before making a decision. The last thing we want is a monolithic viewpoint where 6 people are standing before a president saying the same thing over and over again. You're not going to get the best decisions. That, I think, I'm telling you, is what he...
I don't actually believe he said that. 17 people basically stood in the room and told Donald Trump that the Russians had interfered in our election process. Okay, 0 people stood in the room other than Mr. Trump talking to himself, stating that the Russians hadn't, in fact, interfered in our election. So what he just said is bullshit. The truth is the truth, and if everybody agrees on the truth, and you can't find anybody who disagrees with the truth, exactly what does that make the people who are agreeing with the truth? You don't need extra opinions when you actually have the truth.
Actually prefers, which is a difference of opinion. Put your best argument down in front of me. Okay, now let's go and decide how we're going to move
And
forward.
then I think
That's
most
how
presidents,
Donald Trump thinks.
I think most presidents would agree with that. It does lead to questions about what's going to be done, including on the issue of Iran. All through the campaign, the president-elect said scrapping the Iran nuclear deal was his #1 national security priority. Yet this week on Capitol Hill, here's what James Mattis had to say about that. He said, no, we should keep the deal.
I think it is an imperfect arms control agreement. It's not a friendship treaty. But when America gives her word, we have to live up to it and work with our allies.
President-elect said he was going to follow James Mattis's advice on torture. Is he going to follow that advice on the Iran deal? Is the Iran deal going to stand?
Well, it's yet to be seen, George. First of all, it's not even a signed contract. But let's put that aside. I think what you're going to get from President-elect Trump is all of his folks together: Rex Tillerson, James Mattis, John Kelly, CIA, Homeland Security, everyone that you would want in the room making decisions about that particular document and treaties like that document as to how we're going to move forward. And so I think it's yet to be seen how that is going to shape up. But I can tell you, we all know that President-elect Trump doesn't like the Iran deal. Thinks it's a terrible document, thinks it will create a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, which it already is beginning to do. But moving forward, the best way is going to be something that is going to be a collective decision that is made, of course, with President-elect Trump having the primary say as to how to move forward. But all of those opinions will be in the room. I can assure all Americans that the best decision is going to be made based on all of the information presented to the president at the time to do it.
All right, just cleaning a little housekeeping. It is a document. The United States signed it along with the other countries, so it is a signed contract.
So scrapping the Iran deal is no longer a rock-solid promise.
Well, look, I think it's on life support. I'll put it that way, but I'm not here to declare one way or the other ultimately where this is going to go. But I do believe it's on life support. I know the president-elect does not like the Iran deal, thinks it's really, really bad. And that's sort of the starting point on that discussion.
On China, the president-elect told the Wall Street Journal that the one China policy was also negotiable depending on what China does on other issues, including currency manipulation. The Rex Tillerson, his Secretary of State nominee, said there are no plans to do away with the one China policy. And of course, you've seen the Chinese have come down quite hard on that, saying the one China policy is absolutely not negotiable. So where does that stand right now?
Well, I think both gentlemen are correct. I mean, on one hand, Rex Tillerson's correct. There are no plans to change the one China policy, but certainly that policy's on the table if China doesn't also come to the table and work with us on trade, work with us on the South China Sea and what's happening there. There's a lot going on that is hurting this country, and there's a lot of businesses and a lot of people that put President-elect Trump in office because they are counting on him to get our relationships with China straightened out. And so as part of that negotiation, as part of fulfilling that promise, all of these issues are on the table. But at the same time, Rex Tillerson's correct. There's no predetermined path here, but it's something that is going to be discussed and decided down the road.
Okay, so let me get this straight, should have been the follow-up question. If in negotiations, Mr. Trump doesn't get what he wants, then he is going to declare that Beijing is no longer the representative of China. Taiwan is. Oh, so that's really going to push our relationship with China to new higher levels. Really, that is such garbage. Garbage. There is no way that the one China policy, which Donald Trump in his asinine actions created problems for, there is no way that we, the United States, are going to back away from that one China policy. And what Mr. Priebus just did is not even major. It is astronomical spin.
Heard Bernie Sanders say he thinks that the FBI Director James Comey should think about stepping down. President-elect Trump was very tough on the FBI Director during the campaign, said he disagreed with his final decision on Hillary Clinton. Repeated again this week that he thinks Hillary Clinton was guilty as hell. Does he have confidence in FBI Director Comey?
Yes, he has confidence in Director Comey. We've had a great relationship with him over the last for some time yet. There's no plans at this moment in changing that term, and we've enjoyed our relationship with him and find him to be extraordinarily competent.
First steps to repealing Obamacare taken in the House and Senate this week, and we just heard from Senator Sanders as well saying he wants to see a tweet, believe it or not, from the president-elect. He wants it to be a tweet saying he stands by what he said during the campaign: no cuts in Medicaid, no cuts in Medicare, no cuts in Social Security. Is that still the position of the president-elect?
That's his position, and that's the position that he's going to be taking. So there are no plans in President-elect Trump's policies moving forward to touch Medicare and Social Security.
What about Medicaid? Repealing Obamacare would cut Medicaid.
Well, look, I mean, those are things that we're going to be discussing over the next several weeks, but certainly Obama...
Is that a backtrack? Oh, man, these guys, it kills me.
Care is something that isn't very popular around the country. In fact, it's like an 80-20 issue right now for Republicans. It's not working. People aren't choosing their...
Yeah, but the funny thing about it is the Affordable Care Act has a much higher approval rating.
Doctor, they're not keeping their health care. Premiums are not going down, they're going up. All of the promises of Obamacare, all of those shiny objects that were sold at Christmas in 2009 didn't come true. People voted for Donald Trump. They want to repeal and replace Obamacare, and we will. And we will cover those folks that are on Obamacare that need to be covered. But at the same time, we're going to find ways to lower prices, allow people to choose better doctors, and have a lot more freedom when it comes to health care.
All right, remember those words. They are going to find people, put in a plan that's going to cover just as many, he didn't say more, so I'm not going to try to misquote him, just as many people as the Affordable Care Act covered at lower pricing, okay, lower premiums, okay, and that people are going to be able to find better doctors. Remember those words, because those were the words that President Obama, he didn't use all of them. He basically said that people were going to be able to obtain health care and that they were going to be able to keep their doctor. This guy just said that they are going to improve on Obamacare, okay, obviously by the things that I mentioned. Remember those words. There is no way in hell that they can repeal the Affordable Care Act, keep the fact that you can keep your kids on for until they're 26, which is highly expensive, keep the fact that pre-existing conditions cannot prevent you from getting health insurance, super expensive, keep the condition that there are no longer limits on healthcare, such as when you have like super expensive cancer treatments. The Affordable Care Act stopped the insurance companies from putting those $1 million caps on the treatment. That's super expensive. All of the best parts of the Affordable Care Act are expensive. What pays for the Affordable Care Act is the fact that everybody is mandated to get insurance, so that the younger people who aren't, obviously going to utilize health insurance as much as older people are helping to foot the bill for the Affordable Care Act. Now, to Medicare, there is a tax which helps to support Medicare that we all pay, but in particular, there's a special tax for millionaires to pay that supports that. If you repeal Obamacare, you're repealing that tax, okay, which stops all of the credits to lower income and moderate income people. Obviously, the whole system collapses once that occurs. Also, you have the fact that insurance companies, okay, are bailing because of the potential losses. That's why it was important to get single payer.
Contentious press conference this week on Wednesday with the president-elect and the press corps there. And there was a report in Esquire magazine out overnight saying that you all are considering moving the press corps out of the West Wing and into the old executive office building. Is that true?
Let me tell you where this is coming from, and I know that some of the folks in the press are uptight about this, and I understand. The only thing that's been discussed is whether or not the initial press conferences are going to be in that small press room. For the people listening to this that don't know this, the press room that people see on TV is very, very tiny. 49 people fit in that press room. The one thing that we discussed was whether or not we want to move the initial press conferences in the EOB, which by the way is the White House, so no one's moving out of the White House, that is the White House, where you can fit 4 times the amount of people in the press conference, allowing more press, more coverage from all over the country to have those press conferences. That's what we're talking about. So some of this I think is getting way out of whack, and I think people should be encouraged that there are so many people in the press that want to participate. We had like 500 or 600 folks at the press conference last week. So we started thinking, man alive, if we can have more people involved instead of less people involved, wouldn't that be a good thing? That's what this is about.
Will the president-elect be taking any further steps to deal with his possible business conflicts? We saw what he announced this week, but the head of the Office of Government Ethics said that he considered this meaningless from a conflict of interest perspective.
Right, and the head of the government ethics ought to be careful because that person is becoming extremely political. Apparently may have publicly supported Hillary Clinton, as calling out the president with information on Twitter about our detangling of the business over a month ago. So I'm not so sure what this person at government ethics, what sort of standing he has anymore in giving these opinions. I think Jason Chaffetz was correct to call for an investigation into the government ethics department in the government for the positions that they've taken in this campaign.
And we'll be talking about...
All right, since Mr. Stephanopoulos was not going to call him on that, yes, the current head of the Office of Ethics did contribute to Hillary Clinton's campaign before he got into the position. Subsequent to him getting into position, he hasn't come down against or for either candidate. So again, propaganda and the way that you present things does make a difference. Anyway, I've never liked this guy. This guy, his claim to fame is basically as a numbers cruncher that got thrust into a position to try to get the financial affairs of the RNC in order, which he did by cutting back on the money that they were spending and doing, I will say it, an excellent targeting job for individual campaigns and offices. But as far as being politically savvy and even sensitive, okay, this guy acts like a spoiled child.